can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you. Can
Awesome.
you
All
hear me?
right. Yeah, we can hear you as well. Welcome. All right. I see people in the audience. We're all up here. I think we should just go ahead and get started. There's been a lot to talk about in terms, or a lot of action when it comes to Starknet in the last few weeks. And I think it would be good for us to maybe talk a little bit about that. You guys probably don't pay attention to it as much as we do. And I think it is important to give you guys some information. Chris, before I just ramble on, maybe there's some specific things you want to talk about when it comes to Starknet updates, kind of their announcements, and I'll let you take the stage for that one.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the most exciting thing to me, at least recently, is Starknet released version 0.13 on testnet. And along with that, we're getting some pretty substantial reductions in fees. So if you didn't see that, I shared this yesterday. Um, Starknet fees for compute are going to be dropping by 50%. So basically, they're accomplishing that by doubling the size of the um, block that gets proved and committed to L1. And this is sort of, to me, the most exciting part about ZK rollups. And the original reason why we chose to deploy on Starknet, because they are so well suited to scaling computation. And for us, that's very important, right? Like we're doing, I think, quite a bit more computation on chain than the vast majority of other projects. Um, we are up to and including computing the orbital dynamics for a ship that's traveling between two asteroids, which is quite expensive from a compute point of view. And so when they come in and say, okay, we can just basically by changing one parameter have the fees for compute and knowing that that can continue and will continue, that the more activity there is on Starknet, the lower that will get with really no lower bound besides zero, is incredibly exciting. So, now we're looking at, we've been doing a lot of tuning and a lot of optimization, looking at kind of for all of these different game actions, how much do they cost in gas? How much do we expect that they will cost in gas once 4844 is available on L1? Um, and to see that basically fall in half because we are going to be increasingly dominated by the cost of our compute rather than storage as we get 4844 and definitely as we get volition. It's just really really exciting to see. So, now projecting out to 4844, we're in a situation where our uh, the fees for the sort of median average influence action will be 10 cents or less, um, and sometimes substantially less. And then we're looking at following up after that with volition and inevitably more of these block size increases as there is more and more activity on Starknet that can justify um, increasing the size of those L1 blocks. So we're looking, I think, very very clearly at sub-cent transactions as soon as volition is around, and that's like incredibly exciting because it really opens the door for everything we want to do over the next several years in influence from a cost perspective, and opens us up to any gamer, not just people who have familiarity with Web3, and not even people who have the willingness to spend a bit on transactions, but basically everyone. So I think that's key, and really exciting for me to see that like all of our optimization and all of Starknet's optimization and ultimately Ethereum's optimization with 4844 leads to us having like a economically feasible game, gameplay that people can afford and have fun and not have to think about the fees is was always the goal, and I think we're within spitting distance of now. So I was really excited to hear that. Um, outside of that announcement, they have assured us that they are ready for 4844, and there will be very little delay between 4844. I'm just going to start saying Dankun. Um, very little delay between that being on L1 and the availability of those reduced fees on L2. So we're really, really looking forward to that. They have also been quite active recently in starting to talk more about one of the things that I think makes Starknet unique. As far as I know, they're the only chain, and maybe there are others, but I'm not aware of them, that is proposing this sort of revenue share, this revenue fee share with the dApps, with the developers, with the contracts themselves, rather than just kind of the validators. That's obviously there too, and will still form the majority of their revenue share. But saying, hey, we're going to open this up and actually reward the contracts and the dApps that are driving usage to the chain, I think is really special. And I'd be willing to bet that we'll see it get adopted on a lot of different chains after this. But I do think, for anybody who's considering building on Starknet, building an app with that's related to influence or otherwise, it's a really good time to do that. It's one of those things where building a app that is used and enjoyed means that from day one there's this built-in revenue stream, which is I think super cool, and I think it's going to drive a lot of people's interest and a lot of Starknet's attention in the space over the relatively near future. JP, did you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth mentioning. If you guys haven't already, I would just go check out some of the recent posts from Starknet when it comes to their distribution of Stark tokens. It looks like they are leaning pretty heavily in long-term sustainability and if you're a user or a developer, it looks like you're going to be rewarded, and that's on top of kind of this rev share that Chris has mentioned. Starknet's making huge strides. I think they're really turning on kind of their awareness engine and pushing forward a lot of this stuff that I think is going to be of vital importance to make them that chain that we knew that they could be, and now they're just making that more publicly known. So I'm just very excited to see that. When it comes to building on influence, Chris briefly mentioned this, but ACC will start up again with launch, and if you guys have ideas, things you want to build with influence, it's a great time to do that. It's kind of a 1-2 punch with Starknet RevShare if you're building stuff in Cairo as well. So for anyone who's interested, again, we are going to be working with Starknet at some point to do kind of a education course, like they'll teach some basics on Cairo for people here. So I think it's just a good opportunity. You're here early. If you're a developer or you're wanting to become one, like, it's a great time to think about this. And I think games are a really fun way to dip your toes in the water. I mean, I think games for a long time, as we all know, have had very strong modding culture. And when you get a community for a game that's big enough, you're always going to have developers. So this is just kind of a really good surface area to explore. But no, I think that's about it from that side of it. Chris, was there anything else that you wanted to mention regarding kind of just like ACC or anything?
Yeah, I want to clarify there just what you were saying. That the reason that you're bringing it up is especially in line with this idea that there's going to be revenue share in Starks from Starknet for being a used contract. I think it's worth reminding everybody that the intention and the tokenomics and the contract design of Sway is similar in a lot of ways, in that it's designed around this idea of beneficiaries of the Sway emission. Now that starts out with two. Effectively, one is us, Unstoppable Games, as the developer, and then the other is the community. But the intention is that the ACC is kind of advising initially, and ultimately the community will be deciding on which projects that are driving the usage of Sway, the volume of Sway, the adoption of Sway, should be added as a beneficiary to that. So I think you can imagine, if you're building in this ecosystem, there's a very clear path to instantly having two streams of revenue without even thinking about the actual revenue model of the project. And so I think it's really exciting to think about how the ecosystem can grow with those built in. Provides a lot of incentive to just try something, like just get started and see what happens. maybe potentially without a revenue model in mind outside of that.
Is there like a loose connection, Chris, that we can make to open source here? I keep thinking about it, and it's so cool because it's like, okay, you write code, you put up a contract. The more people who use your code, this is something the open source, open source, drives so much of modern software, and to me, it just seems like this is one way of, I don't know, maybe a glimpse into possible tokenized open source that Starknet is doing, and they're getting there first, right? Because
Yeah, I think
literally
so.
the more people that use your code or build upon it or interact with it, you can immediately get a slice of that
Yeah, and I mean I think
of
that
the compute needs to run it.
there's some edge cases there that are not yet taken care of, like building a specific library that others incorporate into their contracts. But I think you're right in general. If you're building a contract that people get use out of, an app that people get use out of, both in the Starknet ecosystem and in the Influence ecosystem, there's these built-in revenue streams that reward their usage, and the nice thing is that it is fairly directly related to how much it gets used, um, which you're right is in a lot of ways missing from the current open source development community. A lot of times it's kind of uh, development as a passion without really any reasonable expectation of being compensated for it, unless you happen to be part of a Gitcoin round or there's donations that occur. Um, in
Right.
this
Or you
case,
use it in your job interviews or something,
right,
right?
right, yeah, for reputation, but in this case, the prospect of being rewarded for it is, I think, much more clear.
So, maybe we can move on a little bit to the next topic here. But there is a question from Nathrax saying that he's heard EIP 4844 may not be released until March April. Do we plan on waiting until that to release? And if so, can you give some details around pre-release and when people can poke around?
Yeah. So, based on your question, it sounds as if you're wondering if, based on the last part of the question, you asked if we were going to wait, could we at least see some of the features like refining manufacturing prior to pre-release being launched? Um, those features will be part of pre-release, but no, we are not waiting for 4844 for pre-release. We feel pretty strongly that 4844 is required for real launch, for mainnet launch, um, just due to the cost. But we're absolutely launching pre-release prior to that, and all of that functionality, along with everything else, will be part of it.
And you're gonna get a taste for some of that
Yeah, in
right
a minute.
now, actually.
Well, I'm going to
But
make
yeah,
you
I
wait a
guess
little bit
if the
longer.
question was yeah. If the question was specifically, are we splitting the difference between now and pre-release by slow rolling out some of the stuff? I think it's complicated and interconnected is the answer.
Yes.
Um, Chris, do you want to touch on maybe Olmop's question here too? He's saying playing devil advocates here. There will also be an automatically built-in revenue stream for Starknet in every smart contract. How are these weighted? I don't know if you want to give any details on that. It's still
I can
slightly.
give details. It's pretty straightforward. I think it's basically just fees, and this is fees on L2. So obviously, Starknet has fees to pay back to Ethereum. I don't know for certain, but my understanding is that those will probably be deducted prior to kind of calculating that rev share. So I would say, like in our case, where so much of the ultimately the compute is what's relevant, even more so than the storage. We'll probably see a lot of that um, stay on the L2 side and be calculated as part of that. But yes, every smart contract is going to have that revenue stream, um, weighted weighted primarily by the L2 fees that are generated in Starks.
Awesome. So, I think what would be great too is, Sergey, you've been working on a lot of the UI. We're very close in terms of like kind of completion around the UI, but there's been some features you've been working on pretty heavily. Before we dive into the live client, which Chris will do that just here in a little bit, I think you wanted to show off a little bit about the random event system that you've been working on.
Yeah, for sure, and definitely in the interest of not stealing the thunder and keeping it short, because we are going to get a live demo, and that's much much more exciting. But yeah, I just wanted to also keep up with like the transparentness of what we're trying to do here and showcase. Like for me, for UI stuff, I tend to work a couple features ahead of the dev and the client, and I just want to give you a preview of this is the design for random events, which is going to be the mechanism behind progressing your crewmates and progressing in the sway received actually for a lot of stuff. And I am going to be shortly sharing this, and then we'll get to Chris's share. Okay.
It's up. We can see
All
it.
right, it's up. Cool. All right. Just showing you guys the flow, and the flow starts out with, this is another thing I've been looking at. We were looking at all the different states. This is the crew picker screen, and we've been looking at all the possible different states your crews could be in, even like these kind of little noodly things with regards to like error states and when a crew's been booted out of habitats. That's a whole big design exploration we did. I won't get too much into it, but here you can see that I have like 4 crews. Some of them, they have various errors, but this is the crew. This is the crew that just rolled a new event. And so here, if you can imagine logging into the game. You get this yellow event thing right here. And before you enter with the crew, you already know, hey, this crew, whatever they were doing, so the random event gets triggered in the process of game actions, and there's weightings and there's all this other stuff. But here's an example of what would happen when I go in. So I would go in with a crew that rolled a random event. And here's the UI associated with that. You can see, so there's a random event right here. It's right above the ready tasks. There's a couple new, I'm messing around with animated elements. The interesting part here is that the random event is a blocker. So in order to like do anything else with this crew, first things first, you have to respond to a random event. I mean, you don't have to respond to it right away. You can do stuff like defer it, but you can't do anything else with that crew. They are blocked until you deal with this random event. And in this case, this is a random event called Stardust. It is basically the exact text of one of the events that we're going to launch with pre-release. And you're going to see this. And it starts out with a story screen. It'll tell you that like, that there's a short story here that ends with the High Council, basically giving you a reward for being one of the first Adalian pioneers, kind of going into the world. You can see that your crew gets this random event, and then you go to the next page, and the next page says, okay, here is the result, and the result is you have earned sway. Now, the amount of sway, what you've earned, will all be different, but basically it's short and sweet. And this one, and then you get it, and then you can see right here, you'll get a little like a sway incrementer, and bam, there you go. You just completed, you just went through your first random event, and you got a little bit of a reward. And I think this should be very, very satisfying for people to log into their crews and like see that they rolled an event, because for the most part all these events are gonna give you cool stuff and give you currency.
Yeah, just to add to this, Sergey, I think just to be super clear, guys, like when we say random events and you can earn some sway, like this is kind of the way that new inflation supply of sway going into the community. This is the big part of it. So instead of having it super gameable where you log in and you just see like, oh, I do this one thing and I get sway, you have to play the game. And when you play the game, there's different weightings of probability that pop these events out. And at that point, you earn rewards or traits, things of that nature. Chris, do you have anything you want to talk about on this? I know that's been a lot of back and forth when it comes to developing this system.
Yeah, I mean, I'll reiterate something that I talked about a little bit, maybe last AMA or maybe the time before. But yeah, we will launch with an initial set of these, and they're going to drive, the majority of the sway emission back into the game. But there will be more and more of these added. We have, I could look, but I think the list is around 100 of these random events that have been created. They've been assigned to sort of criteria, and they're going to power not just sway, but also the addition of new traits to your crew, as well as some other interesting scenarios that you may just need to be surprised by. But I think one of the really cool things that we managed to do is figure out how to ultimately make these blocking. So these events, when you see them, they are blocking. They have to be addressed before you move forward. And I think that that's really exciting because it allows us to do some more interesting things and makes for some more interesting strategic choices. So like that's a great example in chat. Are there more rewards like a percent speed boost reduction on construction depending on your choices? And the answer is yes. Because of the way that we've implemented these now to be blocking, they can actually have an impact on the currently running activity. I think the example I used last time was, let's say you're running your extractor, and we can have an event that pops up that says like, well, your extractor head broke. It's 100 meters into the ground. What do you do? You've got an engineer on your crew. You can use some time and have the engineer go and figure out how to fix it, and in doing so, they gain a new trait. Or you can go a different route that may result in you getting less material out, but it doesn't waste time. So we can have a lot of these kinds of, I think, really interesting choices that the previous iteration of our design, or our contract design for these events, didn't really make possible. So you'll see us explore that more and more, and kind of release more and more of these events and storylines as exploitation moves forward.
Yeah. It's highly flexible, and I think recapping worth again, we have about 100 events designed. A lot of them are going to be simple, but this is only the beginning. But the simple events are going to mostly be awarding sway for doing various incentivized activities. But soon, hopefully, and giving you a little bit of a story to go along with it. But soon we're going to come to trait awarding events. That's going to give your crewmates traits, and those traits are kind of like permanent boosts that will then be assigned to them, and then help them do better at various things. And then from there, we could go even further and have, like timer boosts. We can have negative events. We can do a lot of stuff down the line.
Yeah, and let me answer these couple of questions real quick on events before we move on. So Nathrax asked, you mentioned that sway events are due to random events. Can a crew trigger the event more than once? Some of them, yes. So some events, and specifically regarding sway emission, the set that we start with will be able to be triggered multiple times. And in that way, we can kind of tune the emission of sway over time, tune the rate of that emission by ensuring that they can trigger multiple times. Some can't, and these will be mostly the ones that are introduced after the launch of exploitation that we will introduce as we go. Some of those you only ever get once, and some of them will be very special because you only ever get them once, and they're quite rare. The other question I see, when are these events triggered? In the start or on the start of the job or on completion? Can't be in the middle. It's true, they can't really technically be in the middle. They can be fired either at the start or the end. And that is actually part of the design change that we made for events in the contracts, to allow them to be fired at the start or the end, and then block the next action, whatever it is. So we can, in this example, block the completion of that extractor until you make a decision. And that can then modify the result, which I think is pretty cool.
Right, and I think we had gone over this, but just to we settled on a pretty good design point, in that you will be notified of that the event has fired actually only when your action has completed, and that is a flow reason thing. Proto is in there. We were discussing it, but like imagine if you're taking a really long journey to another asteroid. And the journey is like over a week, or some action, a really long extraction that you're running. and this random event is rolled, it makes a lot of sense that only after you arrive at the asteroid at your destination, or only after your extraction has finished, that you get notified, because this coincides perfectly with the time that your crew, in a lot of cases, becomes idle and becomes available again. And so this will be a good strategic kind of inflection point, because, oh hey, you arrived at this asteroid, but like, on most of the time you arrive and it's like a trip and you can do whatever you want. But what if you arrived at this asteroid and now, you have an extra little bundle of sway that was randomly rolled in the process? That might change your next action.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's specific to these sway emitting events. It may be the case that for certain events that have different outcomes, they do fire at the beginning, for example. But you're right. For now, for these sway emitting events, they'll fire when you're actually able to use the sway, which is probably nice. Okay, so a couple more questions before we move on. Are they single phase events, or will they be multiple phased events that need completing to progress? And yes, there will be event chains. There are event chains already written. They will be decisions that you can, in some cases, there will be multiple steps in the story. Now, being on chain, technically, those aren't really restricting you because you could pick any of the outcomes. It's just for the purposes of kind of reading the story, breaking it up, having an enjoyable experience, picking the decisions that you want to pick. But there are also then multiple event chains that can only fire in the future if you have already done one of the previous ones. In a lot of cases, we've taken the cosmetic traits, not the impactful ones that actually provide modifications to the game mechanics, but the cosmetic ones that up to this point have had no real use. They're just kind of cosmetic. A lot of those will be triggers, be gates on which events you can have in the future. And so some of the event chains are actually designed around kind of almost like your personality changing over time, and opening up the ability for you to reach certain event chains, potentially even from cosmetic traits that look negative. And so it opens up use for all of them rather than just sort of being vestigial, unimportant pieces of your character.
yeah, again, more theory crafting, but really, really fun to think about trait chains if you want some. I mean, it's like a quest chain, right? Like a lot of RPGs do this thing. You must do quest A, B, and C before quest D even becomes available. And I think this is going to open that up. I think Olmops also asked a good question here.
Yeah,
The
that's a good question.
What do you mean by once? And
So
I think the smug answer is all of the above, potentially, right?
so I think generally crew. Generally, when we say you, we're thinking about the crew. Everything is focused around your specific crews. In some cases, though, it could be a crewmate. For example, your crewmate can't get the same trait twice, so there's sort of a limitation there. Um, but yes, primarily we're looking at you as your crew. Everything is pretty much based around that. When you get in the client, you're playing as your crew. You see your crew. That's your persona.
But in the world of the theoretical sandbox event system, there is nothing stopping us, correct me if I'm wrong, from writing an event that can only ever be accessed once by one crewmate on one crew on one player's account, and it'll be the rarest event ever, right?
We could absolutely do that.
Like
Yeah.
you got somewhere first. This is the trophy for, this achievement, and you
Yeah.
were the only player that could write. I mean, if we wanted to, right? There's nothing stopping us
Absolutely.
from doing hyper
No,
rare
we
events like
have
that.
a lot of flexibility, and I think there's going to be a lot of really fun content that comes out of the event system. Okay, so I'm going to answer one more, and then I want to move on to briefly talk about escrow and the
Yeah.
marketplace, so that I have some time to show you guys the client.
Already
Um,
gonna stop it in anticipation.
so if a trade or bonus is awarded, does it go to the captain or a random crewmate or a relevant crewmate? I think my answer is much the same as what I just discussed, which is that we have sort of infinite flexibility. Sometimes it will go to the captain, sometimes it will go to all your crewmates, and sometimes it will go to the engineer on your crew, for example. All right. So good conversation about events. I'm really excited to share those. A lot of work has gone into those sort of in parallel that has been less visible, but I think will really add a lot of character to the game.
If you had a lot of questions when it came to the showcase of random events, just wait till we share the client.
So real quick before I share the client, I wanted to talk a little bit about contracts because they're done, which is really exciting. So the contracts have been. I mean, I won't say there will be no changes. There almost will inevitably be changes, but all of our systems are complete. All of our contracts are complete. The last piece that was completed yesterday was the escrow and marketplace system, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the why I think that's so cool, and also the marketplace in general. Um, we've had this vision of an unstoppable game, of a game that the community can control, of a game where the players are owning their own assets. And so from day one, it has been important to make sure that Influence is a non-custodial game. That's very helpful from a regulatory perspective as well, but I think it also is very much in line with what the vision of Influence is. And so what that means is that for the core assets in the game, for Sway, for your crewmates, your crew, your ship, your asteroids, those assets you own and you will always own. And Influence, the contracts for the Influence itself never control those assets. And so there's been a lot of thought that we've put into how that works. We've talked in the past about how your crew can be delegated to other contracts. In a lot of ways, that's for safety. But we've also talked about how you are owning your NFTs, and it's only the control that you grant to your crew when playing Influence that kind of activates them in the game. We never have you deposit your assets into a contract. They stay with you at all times. I think that's really exciting. But the same is also true for Sway. So you're never depositing Sway into the Influence contract, to set up a buy order. You're never sending Sway to the Influence contract first for it to then send on to the person that you're paying for a lease, or the person that you're paying to be able to stay at their habitat. That Sway always stays with you, or it goes directly to that other person. And the way we've done that, I think, is pretty interesting. In the case of Sway, there's actually two mechanics that we have built into the Sway contract. One of them is called transfer and forward, and then the other one is called transfer with confirmation. And the idea there is that we're taking advantage of the account abstraction on Starknet, which is native, and taking advantage of the sort of native multi-calls. So in the case of you paying Sway to somebody for something, what happens is you send the Sway directly to that person, and it generates a receipt. And that receipt is unique, and it's stored on chain briefly. And then the next part of your multi-call, you're calling the Influence contract with that receipt. And the Influence contract is able to know that the correct amount of Sway has been forwarded to the correct, in this case, delegate of the crew that is supposed to be receiving the Sway. If all that checks out, then the Influence contract does stuff in the game, changes the game state to reflect what you intended to do with your Sway. On the flip side, for buy orders, which is trickier and was probably one of the more complex problems for us to solve. But when it comes to buy orders, we have an escrow contract. The escrow contract is immutable. It's set up that anybody could use it, and I hope that many others will, because I think it's quite useful. The way that it works is that you can set up an escrow order. Effectively, you can deposit Sway into it, and you can define hooks. So you can say, when I create this deposit, I want it to call out to, in this case, the Influence contract and do something. In this case, that do something is create a buy order on the marketplace you care about for the thing you want to buy. Additionally, when you create that deposit, you also create a withdraw hook, and that specifies how anybody, could withdraw Sway or any other ERC20 from that order in the escrow contract. So for the example of influence in the marketplace, you're setting up a buy order. You would say in your withdrawal hook, you need to, when you're withdrawing from the escrow contract, call into the influence contract and try to fill the buy order, try to sell me some Tainite. And if those withdrawals are directed to the right people, to the right accounts that control the crews that are relevant to those orders, then the order will go through on the influence side. You'll be able to withdraw Sway from the escrow contract. And through that entire process, you, as the depositor, had control over your Sway. You can force withdraw it whenever you want. The person who's receiving it is only receiving it because they were able to fulfill the conditions you specified in the beginning. So I think, that's finished now. It's been hooked up to our marketplace. It's working. I'm really, really excited because I think, again, one of the more complex problems that we had to deal with, and it's kind of in the can. And we've kind of succeeded then in building this fully self-custodied system, non-custodial system where you control your assets and you play the game with them. But we don't ever take control of them. There's never a risk to them. You can trust that the game is just going to do game things and change game state to reflect what you did, what you intended to do with your own wallet, with your assets. So just a little bit of sharing there, but I'm really excited to, be through that, have succeeded with that, and also to be finished with contracts. So JP, anything else before I jump over to share a bit of the client?
No, I mean, I think I don't have anything to piggyback on that. I'm just excited. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting things happen in the future with the contracts that you've created. I mean, not
Yeah,
just
super
for
exciting
influence.
contract news. Are these contracts too, Chris, that when you say you're done, they deployed somewhere where people can view them as well, even though they're not in the client?
They're not deployed yet. In fact, unfortunately, the explorers are not yet even verifying Cairo 1 contract code. So that should happen soonish, and then there will be more ability to actually see them. The escrow contract, however, will be released pretty soon for anybody to use.
Excellent.
Chris, while you're sharing the client, maybe you also want to talk about kind of just like the SDK and the numbers for all of the actions, like timings and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if anybody is interested, I know that whoever is here who has been building already, which there are quite a few, already knows. But we have an SDK. It's on GitHub. /influence.th is the user, and you can find really all the information about mechanics in the game, how long things will take to build, how long processes take to run, how much they'll produce, the recipes. There will still be some changes in there as we firm up abundances, as we firm up the balance through pre-release, as well as we make adjustments in balance. But you can find it's really a wealth of information there about how the game operates, and we use it. It's used in the client, so we dog food that. It's you can trust that if there's a problem in it, we are experiencing the same issue.
I say, take it away.
All right, give me a sec to get this set up.
Yeah. Well, you're getting that set up. Jira, I see your question. Now that the contracts are done, what else remains to be done before pre-release? I'll let Chris color that in a bit more, but UI is the front end of the client needs to all get hooked up to those contracts. So we're going to share the client. You can see the progress that we're making, but there's still more to do there. So I would say that we're pretty close in that, and then there's just a lot of testing that has to be done.
So, well, I tried almost. Hopefully I did. Is there a way to share with full screen?
Yeah, so if you share, then anyone can click on that and they can put it full screen.
I mean, when I full screen it takes it away as an option for some reason.
Oh,
In the
weird.
Chris, in the screen share thing, are you sharing not the application but the screen itself?
Well, I was trying to share the
Oh,
application, but when I full screen Chrome, it goes away. Here, let me just try and
okay, yeah. If you
again.
don't feel safe, I mean, like your full screen
No,
would
it's
be
fine. I just want to see if it will.
up. There we go.
Can you still see it?
Yes.
I can see it. It looks
Yeah,
great.
yeah, it's up.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So I'm going to do a few things. Keep in mind that this is a internal development branch. There may be bugs. There may be some things missing. Well, there are some things missing and bugs, but things are moving along quite rapidly. And I'm just going to show you a little bit about a little bit of what's present now. So I'm just going to kind of walk through. JP, if you're watching chat and somebody has a specific question, let me know, and I'll see if I can show specific things. But in general, I assume everybody here is fairly familiar. But this is Adalia Prime, largest asteroid in the game, and it's where people will start. It's where the first habitat will be. It has been designated on lot 1,602,262. Where it is also on mainnet, and it will stay there. So we have been building out our little colony locally. I can show you all of the different types of buildings. So you can see it sort of lights up like a Christmas tree, but this is the lot search where you can get an overview of what's present. Obviously, you can turn things on and off to kind of focus in. But you can see like, well, we've got 3 warehouses over here and a couple of extractors. As you play around more, obviously you get more familiar with which colors are there by default. You can pick them out more quickly. But yeah, so this is I think my current owned area. Yeah, so that's where I'm playing. The first thing I'm going to do as I've started in a new session is notice that my crew, which is actually present in a light transport. This is one of those things that you won't see just yet. Probably you'd see later this afternoon. But I do have a light transport that's sitting on this lot. You can tell because I can launch it. My crew is inside that light transport, and I see that they are at 8% food, which is not great. What that means is that they're having a 75% rationing penalty because they're below, well, because they're out of food. So that's the maximum penalty you can get when you've completely run out of food. It is pretty crippling, especially with some of these longer lead time items. So I'm going to go ahead and get the crew fed. I can take a look at the warehouses that I have available near me, or specifically the inventories I have available near me. Light transport, of course, also includes an inventory. In this case, I'm going to go to the cheated in, overloaded warehouse that has a lot of everything. I'm going to grab some food and go ahead and transfer that to my crew. I assume you couldn't see the Argent pop up, but that was there. Okay, so Rangers resupplied with 4.6 tons of food. They're now full. We've got 99%. Typically, this would be 100%, but we have the game running at 100x the speed it will run in reality, just so that we're able to test things more quickly. So you'll actually see this ticking down just as we're talking here. So let's look at what else we can do. So we've got warehouses around. We could take a look at some of these. This is one that I built. These are ones that are public. We could take a look at these and transfer something to, let's say we transfer it to the other warehouse. I could go and take a look at all the materials in here. And let's say I wanted to transfer a little bit of food to my owned warehouse. So I could come in here and say, let's transfer 5 tons of food for the next time. Done. Go ahead and transfer. You can see this is very close. It's only 1 kilometer away. Because of my current bonuses, transfers that are 5 kilometers or less are free. Effectively, they take no time. They also take no time for my crew. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer that. It seems my crew is resting, so I'll have to wait a minute to start that transfer. This is one of those things that's a bit of a side effect of us speeding up the time by 100x. We sometimes get conflicts where the block isn't finished while my crew is still resting, but this should be executable in a second. Let me see if I can show you something else while we're waiting. All right, there we go. All right, so that transfer is going to proceed, and it's going to send goods from here to here. You don't see it now, but ultimately you will see a little line moving from the one warehouse to the other to give you an indication that those goods are being moved from place to place. So we can see our surface transfer completed. We'll go ahead and wrap that up. And once it's finished, you'll see those goods have popped into the warehouse. Now, a lot of this is functionality that if you're around for testnet phase 3, you'll recognize. This was present at that point, just sort of a re-implementation of it with the new contracts and with the new UI. So there, complete. So what else should I show you? Let's take a look at some of the new buildings that were not present. Of course, we have extractors. You'll be familiar with those. We could go ahead and sample some, complete some core samples, but I think you're also familiar with those. So let's show something new. Let's take a look at the refinery. And we can talk a little bit about the differences between these production buildings. So the refinery has a lot of processes. You can see when I pull up this list, there are a lot of them. This list shows you both the inputs and the outputs. We'll go ahead and just do a simple water electrolysis. We can pick the origin. You can see this very overcapacity warehouse. And then you can see the 2 output products, and we'll go ahead and pick that same warehouse to output these 2. And the unique thing about a refinery is that you're actually selecting which of the multiple outputs you want to prioritize. So in this case, we've got hydrogen prioritized, and you'll see that the oxygen is being produced at a 50% penalty. I can also select it to be the primary output, in which case I'll get half as much hydrogen. That is modified. This is the primary thing that's modified by the scientists' traits. And so you'll see when we share a bit more about those traits, that the scientists have the ability to kind of increase the secondary product yields. So I'll go ahead and start this. Actually, maybe I won't, because then I'll be stuck for a minute. It'll be harder for me to show you other things. Well, I'll go ahead and start it. All right, so refining those materials is running now. I'm going to jump over and show you then the where is it? Bioreactor. So the bioreactor is unique in that it runs on a batched process. So you'll see as I drag this, the time right here will jump whenever I go from whenever I cross this sort of standard recipe boundary. So these production processes, you may as well round them up. It's always going to be more useful to do the full process. You can do less. For example, if you have less products required, you could do a smaller batch, but it will still take as long as the next standard recipe rounded up. And so the idea of this is you're sort of simulating like, okay, you can grow that field of potatoes. It's going to take the same amount of time whether or not you plant the full field. So in this case, you can see, again, similar flow. You find a warehouse that has the required products. You designate an output inventory, and then you go ahead and start. JP, are there any questions coming up so far?
Yeah, so as of right now, yeah, we have one from Darius. Can we filter through these item lists slash refinery jobs, locations, etc. with text searcher or anything else?
Aha! We already asked that question just in last Wednesday too, and the answer is not as of yet, but we all know that it's going to be really handy because there are a ton of recipes.
Yeah, although I'd be interested in some feedback as to what you would most like to search by. There's sort of a lot of different things you could be searching, and we'd love to be
Yep.
targeted about what we make searchable. To give you an idea of one of those sort of a list like that, here's my assets. You can see, the warehouses that I have access to, the extractors that are, this one's idle, this one's extracting. We've got a factory here that is um, not doing anything yet. So this is kind of one of those lists, probably one of the top lists that you would go to check out. You can see my ship here as well, my light transport. But agree, the more information, the better about kind of what's running. There is, of course, also this kind of overview, the activity list, where you can see what is currently in progress and running. In this case, our refinery, as well as what's ready to take action on. Which in this case, we've got a core sample ready to be analyzed and a calcite extraction that can be completed. I also have this factory here that I have um, shipped things to. So I'll give you a little bit of background on this one. I created a plan for a factory. I was then prompted, actually, I'll go ahead and show you that. Let's build another factory. So if I go to build a factory, I'm going to be shown what's required for construction. We've got some cement, steel beams, avionics module, thermal module, etc. It's going to tell you that the site timer will be up for a day, after which it will be abandoned and other players can grab that site away from you. And then I can just go ahead and create the site.
Mm-hmm. I'm realizing I may have misread Darius's question and thought he was referring to how to find the process in
Oh,
particular.
he
But
means
he
the
was
process
talking about
list.
the like how do we keep track of all the stuff we've refined, and that might be you can look at the events log
Yeah,
actually and see
you
what
could.
tools we have for there because so we have those little colored items in the top left that that indicate when something's they're called action items, and they're only for the jobs that you have, that are either ready to be picked up or that are currently in progress. But for stuff that's been logged, there is a large full screen. Actually, Chris, I think it's, just to the left of the in progress or to the right of the in progress bubble.
Oh,
You
right.
can open up the full. So this is gonna be the full like spreadsheet view of every action this crew has run. And there are filters here, and you should
Mm-hmm.
be able to like say filter by action type refining, sort by date,
Yeah.
figure out all the most
And
recent
this is the spot where
refining
these
activity.
are quite easy to add for us, these filters. So again, if you have feedback on what you'd like to see, we're happy to get that. Cool. Thanks, Sergey.
Question from Olmops is there any cost associated with retooling a refinery? I think this probably is in regards to kind of the
No,
modules, but we don't
right.
have modules anymore, Olmops. So like you just can do whatever it is that you want to do in a refinery.
Yep. Yeah, the modules will be reintroduced during discovery, and their intention is to be um, part of sort of the advanced refinery pathway, where you can tune the refineries at that point to be more productive, but it will take that investment of a module. The baseline refinery is just you pick whatever you want, but you'll see as discovery comes out that you're penalized in that it's not as productive as the more advanced module using refineries.
And then one more question for you, Chris. And I know it's been asked here and there, but hydrogen storage is very inefficient. How many months after exploitation do we expect to see a fuel depot or anything like that?
Well, I can't answer how many months, but it's definitely a topic that we've discussed, and we're trying to address the best way to alleviate some of that. We've already, for example, looked at and will be changing. I'm not sure if that's reflected in the SDK yet, but we're changing the capacity of the ship's the ship's cargo hold to reflect that gases, of course, are larger. So that'll be there initially, but we are also looking at what we can do to kind of allow for a little bit more storage in the warehouses. So cool. I'm going to go ahead then and show you this. So this was the factory earlier. It has had goods shipped to it, and that's proceeds the same way that I showed you with the marketplaces. Buildings, when they are planned, spawn a temporary inventory during this site timer period that you can move the required goods to, and only the required goods. And once those are present, you'll get all these check marks and you can go ahead and start the construction process. So that'll start running. So that to give you all an idea, the current work that is ongoing is very focused on the ships. So we've built several ships. We have them in the process of having them launch. I know for a fact there's a ship in orbit right now, although I can't show it to you. And very shortly after that, then we'll be integrating the remainder of the travel system so that we can start getting off AP, and I can show you a smaller rock next time. So this factory's building. You can see here that the crew is busy. You'll get this countdown. At this point, they can't do much. They're kind of actively getting the factory built. They're not required for the entire time. You can see they're required for about 20% of the time. Once they're finished, the factory construction will continue until it's complete, but your crew is freed up to start doing something else. They could build another factory, or they could start another process. In this case, we've got the refinery is ready. The water has been electrolyzed and it's ready to be delivered to the warehouse. We can go ahead and do that because you'll notice that finish actions by and large do not require the crew to be idle. And that's because we will ultimately be incorporating with the session wallets the ability to have those auto completed. And in that way, I think it will ultimately feel more like a typical game where you're not having to do the completion action yourself, but it just completes and then tells you that it is complete. And that should be coming as part of the introduction of session keys as well.
Chris, there's a few more questions. Do you mind if I?
Sure.
Okay, so one, I think we should probably finish the loop with Darius. He was saying this was more about finding specific items in these big lists. So when you open up the refinery and you choose a specific, process,
Yeah.
is there a way to filter those at all?
Yes, this will very soon have a search bar, and you'll be able to filter through these very quickly. I know it's a little bit of an overwhelming list right now, so that's definitely a work that is in progress. I believe today it'll probably be finished today.
Yeah, and then I see both Sergey and Proto are responding here in chat, but just so that we have it on recording, it's fun to actually read these out. But Chabot says UI suggestion for the color coding for building type is great, but at some point, are we going to see shapes or icons or anything like that to be able to differentiate?
Yes, you will.
Yeah, I've got building icons, some versions of them in the plan. Another thing we plan on adding for sure is the ability to display basically an icon over that like maps to the 3D point, because those buildings are all the 3D points in the asteroid.
Yeah.
So there'll be a little icon that could float over it. The icon will tell you various things. There will be a crew icon.
Mm-hmm.
There can be a way to display the names of certain public buildings, landmarks. And yeah, but we're leaning heavily in the beginning on the color coding. And this is kind of like you're going to have to be changing filters, because right now the color coding, the filter mode is by building type. But if you don't have this color kind of rainbow building type filter enabled, the default will be, I believe, yep, blue versus white. And the white stuff is the stuff that's owned by me, and blue stuff is the stuff that's not owned by me. So hopefully in this default mode, it should be pretty clear where my base is relative to other players' assets.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
something maybe also to point out is, when you're doing the planned building site, you see those little like hologram images. Those are 3D models as well. So I think the hope there is in the future that it we can show more of that, on a quick look versus you having to click into that image. But
Hmm.
again,
Yeah.
that comes later. It's how do we get the game out to you guys that it's fun and playable, and then focusing more on kind of that that type of stuff after exploitation's out.
Well, to be clear, focusing on um, a 3D projection of that building on the surface is potentially after exploitation, but we are intending to have more visual aid when it comes to building
Yep.
determination prior to that.
Yeah, even the site thing too. I immediately was thinking about that. This is even like many months ago, and I was thinking about this, and I was like, okay, right there, this factory site, technically, to be a little bit more representative of what's going on in the world, that is a construction site. So it shouldn't look like a building. So that's another top candidate for like a slightly different marker for, something has been slated to be there, but it's not the same thing as a fully built building.
Chris, a question from Juice. Is this actually a live demo on Gorley? Is the question.
Yep, this is a live demo on Grill. I can send you the dispatcher address if you want to see the events being fired.
Yes, the answer is yes from multiple people. They want the dispatcher address.
All right, fine. I'll send it in chat afterwards.
Yeah.
But yeah,
What else is there? We have a list. Chris, do you want me to look at that list of things you wanted to potentially showcase? Make sure you got them all.
I think I've hit the list, but if anybody wants to see anything in particular, I can tell you if it's here or if it's still a work in progress.
Yeah. So a question here now, obviously, is marketplaces. And when you might get to see those.
Soon. So the marketplace is, like I said, that the complexity around escrow and buy orders was kind of put away, put to the side yesterday, completed, and so the marketplaces then will be hooked up now with that complete. We do have a lot of the UI. Well, basically all the UI for marketplace is done and implemented. It's just not hooked up to the contracts themselves. And then there's a little bit of work around showing the orders, allowing for the orders to be searchable on a wider scale, so across the entirety of the asteroid or even in the belt. So
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
just showing
I'm
little things here and there.
I'm pretty blown away. I mean, to be like perfectly honest, guys, like I am just seeing inventories for not the first time today, but like it hasn't been that long that like we can click around as a team in the internal testnet to see these inventories. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible with all of you guys, and I mean I'm like seeing all these icons that we've had created in an inventory list here that you see on screen. Like I'm I'm gonna be playing with these probably all weekend. Yeah.
Atherax, can you be a little more specific about which ship UI you're referring to? Do you mean just a 3D ship um, view?
Yeah, Chris. I don't know if you can show any of that, but I know you have a light transport built on the surface. Is it
I
something you
do.
can
It's
click
right
on?
here. Well, I can click here, but like I said, it's in state, and therefore why you can see that I can launch the ship, but it's not currently
Oh
shown.
yeah,
That will
yep.
be there today.
And
So
we
you.
did
Later
make
today.
a thumbnail of the light transport on the ground, so that
Yep.
should represent the ship. Another
Yes.
place where an icon would go. Um,
Yeah, the question there to follow up, Chris, is just they're looking at like cargo, and travel. So to my knowledge, I think travel is there, and then the cargo of the ship. As soon as that ship's completed, you should be able to click on it and just be able to look at their inventory.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, like to be clear, a lot of the ship um, movement and travel is being hooked up right now, so you won't see that. But you do have, of course, like the planned flight, which I think you guys have seen before. Let's go to 38. Is present, and this is the flight planner. Um, very soon, because I'm on AP and I am the Rangers, you will see my current ship pop up into this list, and it will use the actual then onboard cargo and onboard propellant. For now, you're seeing the simulated situation, but you can still get an idea of like those trajectories and play around with what's
maybe
possible.
maybe it should be noted, like I think we'll probably be able to show a lot more here when we come back from the holidays, but I believe our weekly or our bi-weekly AMA is going to brush up against pretty heavy holiday time. So I think we might postpone that share by 1 week. Chris, maybe.
Yeah, most likely, I think that's right in the middle of the holiday week.
Yeah, and we would like I'll probably be around, but again, if less people are going to show up and everyone's with holidays, I think it's probably better to postpone. But at that point, we probably can show ship cargoes and travel and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's all in very active development. Well, I shouldn't even say development because it makes it sound like it's further behind than the reality. It's being hooked up. These things have been built. We've seen them. We've moved them around. We've clicked on them. They're being hooked up to the contracts to make sure that they are submitting the transactions correctly, to make sure that we're then receiving back the events correctly from our indexer and reflecting them in the game state. The UI, by and large, has been done.
Question from Juice is there a ship NFT contract on Gorley yet?
Yeah, there is.
And also, if anyone hasn't seen the announcement, pre-release is going to be on Sepolia, so I think that's going to be another thing that we're going to need to do is seed all this data onto Sepolia. I know Chris, you were doing this on L1 Sepolia already, but I don't think you've done it on L2 yet.
No. So Sepolia, Starknet has been Starknet, the ecosystem has been rolling out its support for Sepolia. So the RPC nodes are, I have 2 or 3 now, so I can actually start interacting with L2 Starknet, with Starknet on Sepolia. I found a nice girly to Sepolia pathway on Orbiter, so I can make use of all that girly ether. And I've been in the process then of seeding Sepolia on L1 to get ready for then seeding Sepolia on L2 to be ready for when the wallets hook up Sepolia. So my understanding is that Argent X will be cutting over to Sepolia on January 15th. So prior to that, they won't be supporting Sepolia. I'm not sure what Bravos's plan is there yet.
Question is, can we overload the cargo in a simulated travel UI, or is it capped?
You want to simulate the early adopter ships? That's a good question. It's a good question. I don't think so, but there's no reason why we couldn't. So maybe we will add that to help out with those first 1,600 or so flights.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of theory crafting around that. So, if we can, and that's not a hard thing to add, we should probably do
Yeah,
it.
let me check that out. It's a good suggestion.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I mean, we're sharing, and we hope you guys like it. But feedback is fantastic. Like I'm pretty sure it's a countless number of times that you guys have said things in chats that have led to discussions internally. So we are pretty much at time or a little over already. Maybe give it a minute or two more, see if questions roll in, and then we can close it down. Unless there was anything else you wanted to share, Chris.
No, this is what I want to share. I'm glad I got to.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you guys enjoyed what we have to show so far, and there'll be more and more over the next few weeks as we lead up into pre-release.
All this is recorded. I've double checked that all the voices are there. Sorry for the last one where my voice wasn't recorded. I'll get this on YouTube as soon as we're done with this. It'll take a little while just getting it uploaded and edited, but it'll be there today. So for those who want to rewatch or share, it'll be there as soon as possible.
Cool.
Yep, I think it's just thank yous and praises, mostly to you there, Chris. So, thank you everyone for coming. Enjoy your holidays. We'll be around, maybe a little less than usual, but don't hesitate to ping me. I'm not taking any big vacations or anything. I'm just going to be with family, close to my phone and computer.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being with us. We are getting so awfully close. I'm really excited to get everybody playing soon.
Yeah, play soon.
Thanks, everyone. Happy to be here. Till next time.
Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, talk to you soon. Happy holidays.